And today we are doing section 2.2, which is adding real numbers. So to add a positive number, we move to the right on a number line. When you add a negative number, you move to the left on a number line. So you can certainly use a number line anytime you get stuck in adding. So add a number, use a number line to find this sum. -3 is where we start, and we are adding 6. So because we're adding a positive number, we are moving to the right 6 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our answer is 3. -4 plus -5. Adding a negative, so we're moving to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. End up at -9. 8 plus -11, but we are moving in the left-handed direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. -3. Wouldn't recommend always using a number line just because you can be adding some pretty big numbers, but it's helpful when you're adding numbers where you don't have to have too big of a number line. Okay, we have rules of addition. When you're adding two numbers of the same sign, you need to add their absolute values. And then use the common sign. When you're adding two numbers with different signs, you need to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value. Then use the sign of the number that had the greater. Okay, now we're going to do several examples to make this more clear. Okay, so the first one, find the sum of -5.3 and -4.9. So because these have the same sign, we're just going to add their absolute values and use the common sign. So their absolute values are 5.3 and 4.9. That gives us 10.2. But we need to remember to use the common sign, which is negative. So our answer is -10 and 2/10. For part B, we are adding 19.3 and -12.2. Because they have different signs, we need to make sure that we subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater. So 19.3 has a greater absolute value, so we're actually doing 19.3 and subtracting 12.2, which is 7.1. And we need to make sure that we use the correct sign. We have to use a sign from the greater absolute value, which was positive, so our answer should be positive. Okay, some properties of addition. The commutative property. The order in which you add two numbers does not change the sum. So we're going to state this a little bit more clearly. We add A and B, we can also do B and A, and it's going to be equivalent. The associative property. The way you group three numbers in a sum does not change the sum. Again, we're going to illustrate this with A's and B's. If we have A and B in parentheses and we're adding on C, because we're using addition and this property is stating that we could do A and add it to the sum of B plus C. The identity property, the sum of a number and 0 is the number. So 0 doesn't change a number if you add it. A plus 0 is 0 plus A, which is A. Last property is the inverse property. The sum of a number and its opposite is 0. So A and negative A gives you 0. So now we're just trying to figure out which properties they're illustrating in these statements. If we have x plus 9 in parentheses and we're adding 2, if that's equivalent to x plus the sum of 9 plus 2, which property are we using? We need to go back and reference, that's perfectly fine. And it looks like we're using the associative property. .3 plus negative 8.3 is 0. Well, that's the one that's showing right now. That's the inverse property. And negative y plus 0.7 is equal to 0.7 plus negative y. Because they flipped them around, that is the illustration of the commutative property. Okay, we are now going to solve a multi-step problem. The table shows the annual profits of 2 piano manufacturers. Which one had the greater total profit for the 3 weeks? I think that should be years. Okay, so if we have all 3 numbers, that just means we need to add up each manufacturer. So here's A, here's B. We need to add up negative 5.8 plus 8.7 plus 6.8 for A. Now I think it's easier to work with the 2 numbers that have the same sign first and then add the number with the opposite sign. So if we add 18.7 and 16.8, we get 15.5, and we're adding negative 5.8. And because they have opposite signs, we need to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater, which would mean we would do 15.5 minus 5.8, which gives us 9.7, and we just need to make sure that we use the sign of the greater, which was 15, so we did. A was 9.7. And B, we are adding negative 6.5, 7.9, and 8.2. Again, the easier thing to do would be to add the common signs. That will give us 16.1. We're adding on negative 6.5. Opposite sign, so we subtract. And we get 9.6. And make sure we use the common sign, which was positive, so we did. So which one was greater? A had the greater profits. Okay, now here's some examples we can work through together. I'm going to do the answers for you instead of going through each process. Finding the sum. The answer is negative 7.3. B is negative 6.1. 7 is negative 4.4. Identify the property being used. First one is the inverse property. Second is the identity property. Adding 0 gives you the same number back. And the third one is a commutative property. And that was section 2.